In the summer of 1967, 3 kids vanished after a 4th of July parade in Cottonwood Falls, Kansas. Their family's arrest weeks later shocked the nation, but what was buried beneath that farmhouse never made the evening news. For 58 years, the case has remained sealed. Tonight, we're reopening it. If you believe the past never truly stays buried, hit subscribe. Because this story breathes. The air smelled of gunpowder and melting asphalt. Cottonwood Falls baked under the July sun, flags hanging limp along Main Street, the kind of small-town patriotism that looked good on postcards. At 2:17 p.m., the parade ended. Brass bands packed their instruments. Children scattered toward lemonade stands. Among them were the McCready siblings, Tommy, age 12, Beth, 9, and little Ruthie, 6. They walked the 2 blocks home from the courthouse square, paper flags in hand, laughter trailing behind them. They never made it past the bridge. By nightfall, the town had formed search lines through the cornfields. Sheriff Albright's men dragged the Cottonwood River until sunrise. They found nothing. No shoes, no ribbons, only a plastic toy horse tangled in reeds. 3 days later, the sheriff questioned their father, Earl McCready, a machinist with quiet eyes and a temper the neighbors called biblical. His alibi wavered. First the hardware store, then the feed mill. His wife, Martha, stood beside him on the porch, chain-smoking, saying, "Our babies are gone, and you're wasting time asking questions." On the 7th night, lightning struck the McCready barn and set it ablaze. When fire crews broke inside, they found the trapdoor beneath the hayloft, and what looked like a child's shoe, half buried in ash. Within 24 hours, both parents were in custody. The papers called it the family arrest that shocked Kansas, but the bodies were never recovered. For decades, the farmhouse rotted behind a padlocked gate until the county auctioned it off to pay back taxes. In 2025, a journalist named Eleanor Rowan drove down from Chicago to film what remained for her documentary series Buried Towns. She thought it would be another unsolved relic, an episode among dozens. She was wrong. When her camera caught a face flicker across a window that shouldn't have reflected anything, she realized the Cottonwood case wasn't closed. It was waiting, and the truth would prove that not all disappearances start with strangers. Some begin at the family table, and some begin below it. The road to the old McCready place wound through a valley of wheat and ghosts. It was August now, Kansas sun white as bleached bone, the fields shivering in the heat. Eleanor Rowan drove with the windows down and the recorder running, the hum of cicadas threading through her narration. "This is County Road 9, she said into the mic. Site of the 1967 disappearance of 3 siblings, Tommy, Beth, and Ruthie McCready. Their parents were arrested, later released. No remains were ever found. Locals say the river took them. Others say the house did. Her rental car crested a rise, and there it was, a sagging 2-story farmhouse half swallowed by weeds. The paint had peeled to gray, windows boarded like blind eyes. A for sale sign leaned at an angle, weathered to illegibility. Eleanor parked beneath a cottonwood tree, grabbed her camera, and stepped into the stillness. The air smelled faintly of rust and something sweet. Wild honeysuckle choking the fence line. She rolled the camera and narrated automatically. August 3rd, 2025, first on-site documentation of the McCready property in nearly 50 years. Sheriff's office has given limited access until sundown inside. The house felt smaller than its legend. Floors sagged, wallpaper peeled in vertical ribbons. In the parlor, a child's rocking horse stood turned toward the wall, paint blistered but intact. Her camera light swept across the floorboards, catching initials carved into the wood. T+B+R, shallow but legible. She crouched, tracing the letters. "Tommy, Beth, Ruthie," she whispered. "Still here." The wind shifted. Upstairs, something creaked. Slow, deliberate, like footsteps. She froze. The house had no electricity, no utilities. Only her camera's low whir broke the quiet. "Probably raccoons," she said aloud, though her voice sounded unconvinced. On the second floor, sunlight slanted through broken shutters. One room still had wallpaper, a carnival pattern of balloons and horses. Dust motes swirled in the beam of her flashlight. And there, on the wall opposite the window, a single photograph hung crooked under glass. A family portrait. The McCreadys in their Sunday clothes. Earl stood rigid, hand on Martha's shoulder. The three children sat in front, faces solemn. Eleanor lifted the frame, studying the faint reflection. Her own face overlapped Martha's, their eyes aligning for a second before the glass cracked softly in her hand. She hissed and set it down. By dusk, she'd filmed every room, every nail. When she stepped outside again, the sky had gone violet, the wheat whispering under a breeze that hadn't been there before. She packed her gear, narrating a closing line. The McCready home stands as a monument to the unsolved, to the silence between fact and folklore. Tomorrow, I'll visit the archives at the county courthouse. As she reached for the car door, something caught her eye. A faint glow inside the upstairs window, like a flashlight or a reflection. She swung the camera up, zoomed in. Nothing there, just her own outline mirrored faintly in the glass. She lowered the camera, heart still thudding, and climbed into the driver's seat. Dust swirled behind her as she drove back toward town. The farmhouse shrank in the rearview mirror until it disappeared completely. But the recording, when she played it back that night in her motel room, showed something she hadn't seen. A small figure standing in the upstairs window, hand pressed to the glass, watching her leave. Morning light spilled through the courthouse blinds in bands of gold and dust. The Chase County building hadn't changed much since 1967. Same marble floors, same smell of lemon oil and paper. Eleanor signed the visitor log and followed the clerk down a corridor lined with black and white portraits of sheriffs who all seemed to share the same narrow eyes. The archive room was a tomb of cardboard boxes. Faded handwriting marked each decade. The clerk, a woman in her 70s named Doris Holt, gave her a wary smile. "Everything from that summer's down this aisle. Just don't move anything you don't have to." Eleanor nodded, setting up her recorder on the table. "Was the McCready case ever reopened?" Doris pursed her lips. "Twice. 82 and 93. Both times they came up with nothing but mold. Some folks think it's cursed, do you?" "I think folks see what they need to see," the clerk said, and shuffled away. Eleanor pulled the first file from the shelf. Case number 67-104, McCready disappearance, and began to read. The arrest report was typed on onion skin paper. The ink bled from age. It said the same thing every article had repeated for decades. Parents taken into custody after inconsistencies in their stories, released 2 months later for lack of evidence. But the deeper pages held contradictions no one had printed. On July the 10th, a week after the fire, a statement from neighbor Calvin Dent claimed he'd seen a county vehicle parked near the McCready barn the night before the blaze. That line had been crossed out in blue pencil. Another note, unsigned, read, "Children possibly removed prior to incident. See file B221. She searched for B221 but found only an empty folder, its tab torn. Her pen scratched across the notebook. Missing witness, missing file. Who was driving that vehicle? As she worked, thunder rolled outside, soft at first, then nearer. The courthouse lights flickered. Somewhere down the hall, a radio crackled with static. An old station bleeding through the wires. For a moment she thought she heard children's voices in the interference, singing something low and off-key. Then Doris returned, carrying a folder. "You'll want this," she said. "We keep duplicates for anything we can't catalog properly. It's not official, but You might find it interesting." Inside were photographs, crime scene shots of the burned barn. One frame stopped her cold. Amid the debris, a charred shape crouched near the trapdoor. Not human, but deliberate. The outline of a camera tripod, twisted by heat. Eleanor frowned. Was there a photographer on site? Sheriff Albright hired one from the Gazette. Never could track down the negatives. Some said he quit, moved west. Others say he went missing, too. Doris hesitated. You planning to film that place again? Yes, Eleanor said softly. Tonight. By the time she left the courthouse, rain had started. A steady whisper against the car roof. She drove to the motel, reviewing her footage from yesterday frame by frame. In the shot of the house, the window glow still flickered faintly. She froze the image, enlarged it. The figure's outline was clearer now. A small body, hair in curls. Ruthie. She shut the laptop, pulse hammering. Slight artifact, she told herself. Nothing more. But when she plugged in the camera battery, its clock had reset to July 5th, 1967, 4:42 p.m., the minute the case always returns to. Outside, thunder shook the motel walls. The reflection in the dark TV screen showed her sitting at the desk, except the reflection blinked before she did. Rain slicked the road in ribbons of light. The headlights cut through mist that seemed to rise straight out of the earth, curling around the trees like smoke. Eleanor drove with one hand on the wheel, the other gripping her recorder. The dashboard clock blinked erratically. 3:02 a.m., though she was certain it had been 11:15 when she left the motel. Field entry log, she whispered, voice low to steady herself. August 4th, 2025. Returning to McCready property after hours to document possible anomalies in structure and foundation. Camera timestamp malfunctioning. The dirt lane narrowed, swallowing her in darkness. When she reached the clearing, the house looked different, sharper somehow, its silhouette clean against the lightning. The wheat bowed as if to an unseen wind. She cut the engine and listened. Silence. She started rolling immediately, camera on infrared. The lens painted the landscape in false color, ghostly blues and whites. The barn was little more than a frame of ribs now, black timber slick with rain. She stepped through the broken door, beam of light sweeping across the floor. Char marks still laced the boards, curling like veins. Beneath one pile of collapsed wood, something metallic glinted. She knelt, pried it loose. A belt buckle, corroded but intact. Stamped across its back, C.D. Calvin dent. The neighbor. A low crack came from the far corner. She swung her light there, nothing but rain leaking through the roof. She exhaled, pocketed the buckle. Then she saw it, the faint outline of a square in the dirt, lighter than the rest. The trapdoor, the same one they'd found during the fire. She brushed away soot. The hinges had fused, but the handle moved under her fingers. With a groan it lifted an inch, releasing a breath of air that smelled of ash and something chemical. Kerosene, old and sharp. She held the camera close, recording every inch. Her fingers trembled. The ladder below descended into black. She hesitated, then lowered herself halfway down, boots finding the first rung. The air felt dense, too warm. The beam from her camera light swept across the space below. Walls lined with tin, floor covered in cinders. At the center, a ring of scorched concrete surrounded by darker stains. She whispered, "Burn pit," and felt her stomach turn. A sudden burst of static from her recorder made her flinch. Voices seeped through. The same faint children's hum from the courthouse. Then, beneath it, a man's voice. "They'll never find them if you keep quiet." The sound faded as quickly as it came. Her pulse roared in her ears. She climbed out fast, heart pounding. Outside, the storm had eased. The horizon glowed with false dawn. She backed toward the car, keeping the lens on the house. The window where she'd seen the figure yesterday was dark now. She started to speak her closing log. Evidence suggests. A flash of white light filled the frame. For an instant, the entire house gleamed, every board illuminated from within, as though lit by a single hidden flare. She blinked against it, and when her vision cleared, the windows reflected movement. 3 small silhouettes inside, watching from the upstairs landing. She ran. By the time she reached the car, the light had died. The camera dangled at her side, still recording the faint sound of rain. When she watched the footage later, she realized the light hadn't come from the house at all. It had come from beneath it. The diner sat on the edge of Main Street, its neon sign half dead. Coffee burnt to syrup. Eleanor had been here before. Every town had one. A place where the old stories waited for someone to ask. The waitress, a woman with silver hair pinned tight, slid a mug toward her and nodded at the camera case by her elbow. "You're the reporter, aren't you?" "Documentarian," Eleanor said, "working on the McCready case. Then you'll want Deputy Klein. He comes in every Thursday for pie." She didn't have to wait long. The bell over the door jingled, and a tall man in his 80s stepped in, still broad-shouldered beneath his denim jacket. Walt Klein, former deputy under Sheriff Albright. His limp was new, his gaze steady. When Eleanor introduced herself, he gave a small nod. "I figured someone had come poking again," he said, sliding into the booth. "That story never stays buried." She switched on her recorder. "You worked the scene?" "I worked the first 2 nights. Before the sheriff told me to stop asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "Why the state troopers were here before the call went out. Why there were Army personnel working the riverbed the morning after." He stirred his coffee absently. "That wasn't no family tragedy. That was cleanup." Eleanor leaned forward. "Cleanup for what?" Klein's eyes drifted to the window, where the rain blurred the parking lot into silver streaks. "You ever hear of Camp Halleck? Old missile range 30 miles north. Closed in '65 or so, they said. My daddy did maintenance there after the war. Told me they stored things in those tunnels. Chemicals, maybe worse. When the wind blew from that direction, the fish turned up dead." She frowned. "You're saying the McCready land was connected to the range?" "Same river runs through both," Klein said. "And when that barn burned, there were men in unmarked trucks hauling barrels out before the fire was cold. Sheriff said they were state hazmat. I called Topeka. Nobody knew a thing." He reached into his jacket pocket and set a cassette on the table, the label long since peeled away. "Found this in my garage a few years back. Old interview from '68. Sheriff recorded everything. I think he meant to hide this one." Eleanor took the tape carefully. "What's on it?" Klein sipped his coffee. "A confession, but not to murder. To containment." She drove back to her motel with the wipers squealing and thunder muttering like an old man in the hills. The tape sat on the passenger seat like a small, heavy secret. Her hands itched to play it immediately, but she waited until she was inside with the lights off, laptop recording the playback. A hiss of static, then a man's voice. Gravel, nervous, unmistakably Sheriff Albright's. "This is interview number 17. Date, July 28, 1967. Subject, Earl McCready." Another voice answered, low and shaking. "You think I don't know what they took? They weren't supposed to touch the river. It spreads through the soil. I told them the kids go down there." "Who's them, Earl?" "The men with the trucks. The ones you said were here to clean up the spill. They said keep quiet, said they'd pay for the land. But Martha, she saw what they buried. She saw the water glow at night, and the children, they were playing by the bend. They touched it. You can't wash it off a scrape, a chair shifting." Then a third voice, unfamiliar, commanding. "That's enough. End the tape." Static swallowed everything. Eleanor sat frozen, the hum of the motel fridge filling the silence. "A contamination cover-up," she whispered. "Not a kidnapping." But the next thought chilled her deeper. Then where are they now? She rewound the tape, listened again. At the very end, beneath the static, a faint noise surfaced, children laughing or maybe crying, and a single word, almost inaudible. Below. The following afternoon, she met Klein again. He sat in his truck outside the diner, staring at the wheat fields. When she told him what she'd heard, he nodded slowly. Below, yeah. That's what the sheriff wrote in his last report before the feds came. Then he hanged himself a month later. Eleanor's throat tightened. Do you know where he meant? County records say there's a drainage tunnel under the old McCready property, built during the Depression for flood control. Runs straight to the river. She loaded her gear into her car, adrenaline thrumming. Then that's where I'm going. Klein caught her arm. His grip was iron for an old man. Don't go alone, he said. You start seeing lights down there. You turn back. You hear laughter. Run. She nodded, but she already knew she wouldn't listen. That night, she parked by the riverbank under a half moon. The fields whispered in the dark. She checked the camera battery, full charge, and descended the slope toward the gully where the trapdoor had been. A rectangle of concrete jutted from the mud, a rusted grate sealing the tunnel mouth. Water gurgled softly beyond. The smell was chemical, metallic. She aimed her light into the opening. The beam caught the curve of a tunnel disappearing into blackness, its walls slick with algae. Something flickered deep inside, too regular to be natural, like the blink of an old projector bulb. She set up the tripod, recording as she spoke. Exploration log, August 5th, 2020 hours. Possible drainage access beneath McCready Farm, likely built pre-war. Observed intermittent light source approximately 30 meters inside. Her voice echoed back, distorted, repeating words that weren't hers. Light source, below. She stepped closer to the opening. A cold draft brushed her face, carrying a faint, childish giggle. Her knees went weak. She steadied the camera and leaned in. The tunnel walls seemed to shimmer, reflecting more light than her beam could make. She thought she saw movement. 3 small shapes standing ankle-deep in the water, their outlines soft as fog. Then a man's voice spoke right behind her ear, clear as daylight. You shouldn't have come back. She spun, light flaring over empty field. Nothing there. The voice had come from the recorder still running in her hand. When she looked back at the tunnel, the glow had vanished. Only darkness remained, rippling faintly with the river's breath. Eleanor shut the recorder off, heart hammering. Tomorrow, she whispered to herself, I'll come back in daylight. But as she turned toward the car, the camera still pointed at the tunnel, recording the final seconds. The lens caught a new reflection, her own silhouette. Standing inside the tunnel, facing out. Dawn burned the mist off the valley, turning the wheat pale gold. Eleanor parked by the river again, exhausted but wired. The tape recorder from last night sat on the passenger seat, silent now, as if it had dreamed with her. She stepped out into the stillness. The only sound was water dripping from the trees. The air smelled of iron and rain. Her shoes sank into the soft mud as she climbed down the embankment to the drainage grate she'd found. In daylight, it looked smaller, almost harmless, just a rusted mouth half hidden by weeds, but her hands trembled when she unbolted the grate. Inside, the tunnel breathed cool air that smelled of stone and something chemical, faint but sharp. She started recording again. August 5th, 2025. Entering the drainage system beneath the McCready property. Tunnel appears to extend northeast toward the old river bend. Depth, approximately 6 feet high, brick-lined. Air stable. She switched on her headlamp and ducked inside. The light stretched down a corridor that seemed to swallow sound. The floor was slick with silt, her boots sloshing softly. Her reflection moved along the wet walls, doubled, distorted. After 20 yards, the ceiling dropped lower. She crouched, brushing aside hanging roots. Symbols scratched into the brick caught her eye. Chalk drawings, crude but deliberate. 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a triangle that might have been a roof. Beneath it, the words, "We're below," written in a child's uneven script. Her stomach turned. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Kids wrote this." She filmed every mark, every inch of wall. As she did, her headlamp flickered once. Then she noticed the floor had changed. No longer brick, but poured concrete, stained a darker color. A faint hum filled the air, like faraway machinery. She followed it. The tunnel widened abruptly into a chamber, a circular culvert where runoff pipes converged. In the center lay a rusted metal drum, its lid warped, the ground around it blackened. A warning stencil on the side read, "USARMY." Eleanor stepped closer. A chill ran through her, even though the air was warm. She crouched to film the label, brushing mud away with her sleeve. The Geiger counter she'd clipped to her belt began to tick softly, then faster. Her mind flashed to Klein's words, "Clean up." She took 3 quick photos and backed away. The hum deepened, vibrating through her boots. From one of the smaller tunnels came a rush of air, as if something had exhaled. Her recorder buzzed with static again, and beneath it, faint voices. Not words this time, just laughter, thin and distant. She raised her camera, sweeping the light across the walls. Moisture gleamed like sweat on stone. For a heartbeat, she saw movement. A pale hand vanishing around the curve of a pipe. She swallowed hard. "Hello?" No answer, just dripping water. She edged forward, camera shaking. The passage beyond turned sharply left and climbed upward. The walls narrowed until she had to turn sideways to move. Her lamp caught something embedded in the mortar, a small, rusted badge. Sheriff's star. She pulled it free, wiping off the grime. Albright was stamped across the back, her throat closed. "What the hell were you doing down here?" Behind her, the laughter faded into a single soft voice. "Looking." Eleanor spun, heart slamming. The tunnel was empty. Only her own breath echoed back. She bolted toward the exit, camera bouncing against her chest. When daylight finally broke through the opening, it looked painfully bright. She crawled out into the grass, gasping, mud streaking her jeans. The Geiger counter fell silent. The recorder hissed once and died. Later, at the motel, she scrubbed herself raw under the shower, the chemical smell clinging to her skin. She replayed the footage frame by frame. For long minutes, it was just tunnel walls and her own breathing. Then, halfway through, a flash of white appeared at the edge of the frame. 3 small figures standing beside the barrel, their outlines shimmering. She froze the image. The children's faces were indistinct, but one, taller than the others, seemed to turn toward her. It wasn't Tommy, Beth, or Ruthie. It was a boy she'd never seen before, his features blurred by light. She leaned closer to the screen, heart pounding. There was something in his hand, an old key. At the bottom of the frame, the time code glitched, flipping backward until it read 07-05-1967, 4:12 p.m. And the last line of audio, barely audible, whispered the same word as before, "below." Eleanor woke to the sound of rain and the taste of rust in her mouth. The footage from the tunnel still glowed on her laptop screen, paused at the frame of the boy with the key. She hadn't slept. The motel walls felt too thin, the hum of the air conditioner like distant breathing. She rewound the video again, zoomed closer on the boy's outline. The key hung on a twine loop, its bow shaped like a star. She scrubbed through other frames, tracing the light flare until she found it again, etched briefly on the barrel lid behind him. Numbers, 22-9-7. Coordinates, maybe, or a date. She flipped open her notebook, writing it down. September 22nd, 1967. That was 11 weeks after the disappearances. The McCreadys would have still been in custody. By noon, she was back at the courthouse archives. Doris Holt gave her a tired smile. Back so soon? Need property records, 1967 to 1970. Anything linked to Army leases or underground utilities near the McCready land. Doris rifled through a drawer, frowning. You journalists sure pick the ghosts with teeth. She returned with a folder thick with blueprints and permits. One caught Eleanor's eye. Project Keyhole, Federal Water Management Survey. September 1967. The map showed a red star roughly 2 miles north of the McCready farm, beneath an access road labeled Sector 22. Eleanor's pulse quickened. What's there now? Nothing, Doris said. The Army filled it in after the flood of '68, supposedly. The rain had stopped by the time Eleanor reached Sector 22. The road was cracked, half swallowed by weeds. To one side, a rusted chain-link fence sagged around a cluster of concrete hatches. Most were welded shut. Warning signs faded to ghosts. Danger, government property. She parked at the edge, grabbed her camera, and ducked under the fence. The air smelled like ozone and mud. Her boots squelched as she crossed the lot, filming. One hatch still had a visible number stenciled on it. 9-7. 22-9-7, she murmured. The code. The lock was old, corroded, but the key from the video hadn't been decorative. She took a paperclip from her notebook, bent it into shape, and worked it into the mechanism. After a minute, the latch clicked. The hatch groaned open, releasing a draft of cold, metallic air. A ladder descended into darkness. She clipped the GOPRO to her vest and climbed down. The chamber below was smaller than the drainage tunnels, square, concrete, dry. Fluorescent tubes hung dead from the ceiling. On the wall, in peeling black paint, a single word: storage. She panned her light slowly. Rows of rusted lockers lined the far wall. Most were open, empty. One remained sealed with a brass padlock shaped exactly like the key in the footage. Her stomach tightened. No way, she whispered. The padlock was fused with corrosion, but the latch gave when she pulled. The door creaked open. Inside lay a wooden box stamped property of U.S. Army Medical Corps. She lifted it gently, set it on the floor, and flipped the latches. Inside, wrapped in yellowed gauze, were 3 small glass vials filled with cloudy fluid and a roll of film labeled Holloway Trial, eyes only. A chill crawled up her neck. Holloway, the same surname from the county's oldest flood control committee, the same one linked to Project Keyhole. She stuffed the vials into her pack and pocketed the film. When she turned, her light caught something scratched into the back of the locker door. Letters etched deep into the metal. T+B+R. Her breath caught. Tommy, Beth, Ruthie. The Geiger counter on her belt clicked once, then again faster. The air thickened with static. Somewhere above, metal clanged. Footsteps on the hatch. Hello? She called. Who's there? No answer. The ladder vibrated slightly, as if someone had just climbed down halfway, waiting. She killed the light and held her breath. The darkness hummed. Then a soft, rhythmic tapping echoed through the room. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks again. She flicked the light back on. No one on the ladder. No one anywhere. Only dust motes drifting in the beam. Her camera display flickered to static, then flashed a new timestamp. September 22nd, 1967, 00:03. The walls around her seemed to pulse once, faintly, like a heartbeat through concrete. She forced herself up the ladder, lungs burning. When she pushed the hatch open, the world above looked washed out, lightless. The wheat fields drained of color. The air buzzed like an old television on mute. She stumbled toward her car, half blind, gripping the film canister like proof against insanity. The landscape shimmered in her peripheral vision, shapes sliding where they shouldn't. When she finally crossed the fence, everything snapped back into normal color. The sound of cicadas roared back like applause. Back at the motel, she sealed the vials in a sample bag and laid the film canister on the bedspread. Her hands shook. The label was brittle, the handwriting military neat. Holloway, test footage 12B. She loaded the film into her digital scanner, frame by frame. The images were grainy, monochrome, soldiers in hazmat suits beside river tanks, measuring something unseen. Then the next frame froze her blood. 3 children standing at the riverbank, eyes wide, hands glowing faintly under ultraviolet light. At the edge of the shot, a woman in a lab coat held a clipboard. Her face was turned away, but the name tag was clear. Dr. M. McCready. Eleanor stared, her pulse hammering. The mother hadn't been a bystander. She'd been part of it. Thunder rolled far off, shaking the window panes. She whispered to the empty room. Martha wasn't hiding them from the world. She was hiding the world from them. The film jammed in the scanner, tearing with a dry snap. The screen went white. For a moment, she saw her own reflection ghosted over the image, eyes glowing faintly, just like theirs. Eleanor didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. The air in the motel room felt charged, every shadow vibrating with the low hum of the rain outside. The torn strip of film hung from the scanner like a wound. Each time the thunder rolled, the fragments of the image. 3 glowing children, their mother in a lab coat, seemed to shimmer back to life. By dawn, she decided to develop the rest herself. She found an abandoned photo lab behind the old gas station, its red Kodak sign faded, but the plumbing intact. She blacked out the windows with duct tape, set up the chemicals, and began feeding the surviving negatives through the reel. The smell of fixer filled the room, sharp and metallic. The images bloomed slowly in the trays. Test sites, riverbeds, children's toys laid out like evidence. The military markings on the film edge confirmed it. Department of Defense, Project Holloway. Every few frames, the McCready farmhouse appeared, progressively more damaged. In one sequence, she saw men in hazmat suits standing near the well. They carried vials identical to the ones now in her pack. One man bent down and touched the water. A bright flare of light erupted in the film's emulsion, bleaching his hand white. When he looked up, his face was blurred, overexposed, or erased. Another sequence showed Martha McCready holding a child's hand, Beth's maybe, and leading her away from the river toward the barn. The final frame before the reel burned out captured the barn door half open, a white glow spilling through the crack. Eleanor's stomach twisted. She replayed the frames, counting the intervals. Every exposure pulsed like a heartbeat. 3 seconds between each flare. 3 children. She rinsed the negatives, hanging them to dry, and spoke into her recorder. Recovered film fragment shows direct military involvement in Cottonwood experiments, likely biological or radiological. McCready parents appear complicit. Objective unclear, possible attempt to contain contaminated subjects. Her voice broke on the last word. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air buzzed as if the storm were waiting to start again. She stripped off her gloves and sat on the counter, staring at the negatives swinging gently from their clips. In their shadows on the wall, the 3 children's shapes swayed back and forth like pendulums. By afternoon, she was driving north to Junction City to meet a retired Army medical officer named Dr. Samuel Price, one of the last surviving names connected to Project Holloway. She'd found him listed in an old personnel directory tucked inside the film canister's lid. His address was scrawled in pen beside the note, "No visitors after dusk." The old man lived alone on a ranch at the edge of town, the yard overgrown with yucca and sage. When he opened the door, he looked both startled and resigned. "I figured somebody would come one day," he said, voice gravelly. You look like her, you know. Eleanor blinked. Like who? Dr. Martha McCready. He led her inside before she could reply. The house smelled of dust and camphor, the walls lined with old photographs, soldiers, laboratories, children in hospital gowns. He poured 2 glasses of water, though his hands shook. You were on Project Holloway? She asked. He nodded. Medical consultant. They told us we were testing radiation containment methods, trying to measure how long isotopes lingered in groundwater. But it wasn't that simple. He reached for a folder on the table and opened it. Inside were yellowing memos, stamped classified. The top page read, Subject Viability Program. Phase 2, Pediatric Adaptation Trials. Eleanor's throat went dry. You used children. They weren't supposed to be local, he said quietly. They brought them from base hospitals, but something changed. One of the scientists wanted to see if exposure in utero would alter cellular decay. She risked her own family, believing exposure could preserve them until a cure existed. He looked up, eyes filled with guilt. Martha thought she could make them immune. Eleanor whispered, To what? To time, he said. Eleanor's skin prickled. You mean biological aging? Radiation damage? Price shook his head slowly. No, time itself. She believed exposure to trace isotopes might slow metabolic decay, preserve life in a kind of suspended resonance. She wasn't insane, at least not at first. The data looked promising. The kids hardly aged in the months after exposure, but then they started to change. He stood, pacing toward the window. The late afternoon light carved hollows in his face. Their reflections began to blur. Sometimes they wouldn't appear at all. We kept them under observation in the containment lab near the river. The townspeople thought it was a storage site. Then one night, they vanished. You mean escaped? Vanished, he said firmly. No doors, no tunnels, nothing. Only light. Eleanor's heart pounded. And the parents, arrested when they tried to destroy the records. But Martha disappeared before trial. Some said she walked straight into the river. He turned to her. You found the canister, didn't you? The vials? She nodded slowly. 3 of them. He sighed, almost relieved. Then it's true. True that she tried to preserve them. True that it worked. The room fell silent. Rain began again, soft at first, then heavier. Eleanor stared at the negatives spread across his desk, children glowing under ultraviolet, smiling at something unseen. Price's eyes glistened. You think they died. But some nights, near the old sector, you can hear laughter under the water, like an echo that never ends. She whispered, Why tell me this now? Because you're already part of it. He pointed to the recorder on her lap. You've seen the light. It's how it passes on. Before she could respond, the bulbs overhead flickered. A low hum built under the floor. The same sound she'd heard in the tunnels. Price's expression collapsed into fear. It's happening again, he murmured. You brought it with you. Eleanor grabbed her camera. What's happening? He backed away, clutching his chest. Every time we remember them, they come closer. The house shuddered. Glasses rattled on the counter. For a moment, the walls shimmered as though underwater, rippling outward. Eleanor's reflection in the window split into 3 pale shapes standing behind her. Dr. Price! But he was on the floor, eyes open, breath gone. The hum faded instantly, replaced by the hiss of rain. Eleanor knelt beside him, shaking. On the desk, one of the negatives still glowed faintly in the lamplight. 3 children beside a woman, all holding hands. The woman's face had changed. It was hers. She stumbled to her car, the wind tearing through the sage. The recorder crackled alive on the passenger seat, though she hadn't touched it. A child's voice whispered, Time isn't gone. It's waiting. Then silence. Back at the motel, she uploaded the new footage, hands trembling. In the reflection of the laptop screen, she saw not her face, but a younger version. Same eyes, same shape, hair cut like the girl in the film. She touched the glass, half expecting it to ripple. The timestamps on her files had changed again. September 22nd, 1967, 4:42 p.m. Her breath caught. That was the same moment recorded on the final reel, the instant the children vanished. She whispered into the recorder, voice thin. If McCready altered the boundary between memory and time, the contamination isn't chemical. It's cognitive. Observation keeps the experiment alive. Outside, thunder rolled over the hills. The motel lights dimmed. In the darkened mirror, 3 faint silhouettes formed behind her, their outlines flickering like old film stock. One of them raised a small, glimmering key. The tape hissed, then clicked off. Eleanor drove until the headlights blurred into rain. The road to Cottonwood twisted like something alive, the fields on either side silver under lightning. Her hands shook on the wheel. Price's body, the collapsing house, the whisper that had followed her into the car. It all replayed in flashes, like frames of film burning in sequence. By the time she reached the bridge, the storm had thinned to drizzle. The valley below lay veiled in mist. She parked at the shoulder, staring down at the Black River. The tunnel entrance was somewhere beneath the slope beyond the fence, hidden by roots and overgrowth. She knew she should call the sheriff, the lab, someone, but no one would believe what she had. And part of her knew the story wasn't about belief anymore. It was about containment. The experiment hadn't ended in 1967. It had only changed shape. She shouldered her pack, switched on her headlamp, and descended the muddy incline. The air grew colder as she neared the embankment. Lightning flickered again, illuminating the spot where she'd entered before, the grate now half torn away. She ducked inside. The tunnels seemed narrower this time, as if the walls had crept closer. Water whispered down the bricks. Her breath fogged in the beam of her lamp. Somewhere deeper, the steady hum she remembered began again, low, rhythmic, like a pulse behind the stone. She switched on the recorder. August 10th, 2025. Returning to the McCready drainage system, tracing signal consistent with prior audio anomalies. Objective: locate primary containment site described by Dr. Price. The tunnel sloped downward, curving toward the direction of the river. Every 20 feet, she marked the wall with chalk. The floor turned from mud to concrete, then to something smoother, metallic, almost polished. Her light caught faint patterns etched into it, concentric circles overlapping like ripples frozen mid-wave. She paused, heart hammering. "It's man-made," she whispered. At the next bend, the passage widened into a corridor lined with glass panels clouded by condensation. Behind them, shapes. She stepped closer, wiping the glass with her sleeve. For a moment, the reflection that looked back wasn't hers. It was a child's face. Eyes open, faintly luminous, smiling. Eleanor staggered back, hitting the opposite wall. The recorder thudded against her chest, hissing with static. 3 containment cells visible, possible human forms, preserved state unknown. The hum intensified until the concrete vibrated under her boots. Lights flickered behind the glass, one by one, in perfect rhythm with her pulse. When she reached the end of the corridor, a steel door waited, its surface embossed with a single symbol, a lantern surrounded by 5 stars. The same emblem engraved on the hatch she'd found weeks earlier. She reached out. The door was warm. For a moment, she saw movement beneath its surface, reflections swirling as if a body of water waited behind the metal. She forced herself to breathe, remembering Price's words. "You've seen the light. It's how it passes on." Her fingers found a keyhole beneath the handle. She took the rusted badge marked Albright from her pocket, pried the pin free, and worked it into the lock. A slow, heavy click echoed through the tunnel. The door opened inward on a breath of air so cold it numbed her skin. Beyond it lay a circular chamber bathed in dim blue light. The ceiling arched high, dripping condensation. At the center stood a platform surrounded by water that glowed faintly from beneath, casting patterns on the walls like rippling film. On the platform, 3 metal pods, open and empty. Eleanor stepped closer, the recorder still running. Primary containment confirmed. 3 units. Status: vacant. Residual luminescence stable. She knelt, touching one pod's rim. The metal was smooth, untouched by rust, humming faintly. Her reflection split into 3. Then, from somewhere behind her, a child's voice whispered, "You came back." Eleanor froze. The words were soft, almost kind, yet the air vibrated with them. She turned slowly, her headlamp sweeping across the chamber. Nothing moved. The tunnel behind her lay empty, the mist curling in lazy spirals. Then the voice came again, closer this time. "We were waiting." The light flickered, and for a heartbeat, 3 figures stood at the edge of the glowing water, children, half transparent, their eyes lit from within. Tommy, Beth, Ruthie. Each looked just as they had in the photographs from 1967, untouched by time. Eleanor's breath caught. Beth tilted her head. "You remember us." Eleanor forced herself to lift the camera. "You were part of the experiment. Your mother, she was trying to protect you." Ruthie shook her head. "She was trying to keep us here." But the river doesn't keep. Tommy stepped closer, light spilling from his hands. "It remembers." The chamber's hum deepened, pulsing like a heartbeat through her ribs. The glowing water brightened, reflecting on the walls in endless shifting loops. Eleanor's recorder crackled. Beneath the static came Dr. Price's voice, distant and broken. "Observation sustains them. Don't look too long." But she couldn't look away. The children's outlines rippled, splitting into countless echoes, each smaller than the last, spiraling into the glowing pool. Her reflection multiplied with theirs until the chamber felt crowded with versions of herself, all watching, all recording. "Where did you go?" she whispered. "Where did they send you?" Tommy lifted a hand, pointing toward the pool. "Below." The water surged upward in a column of light. It wasn't water anymore, but something thicker, memory liquefied. Within it, shadows drifted like film reels suspended in gel. Eleanor stepped closer, hypnotized. The light refracted across her face, and in its brightness she saw fragments of lives. The McCreadys on their porch, Martha holding the vials, Sheriff Albright diving into the river, Price writing a confession he'd never send. All of it layered like overlapping negatives, alive in the same moment. "You don't belong here," Beth whispered. Eleanor reached out. "I just want to understand." "You already do." The light expanded until it swallowed her hand, her arm, the camera. Images rushed through her mind, faces, voices, all bleeding into one sensation. Time collapsing inward. The hum grew deafening. Then, just as suddenly, silence. When she opened her eyes, she was lying on the platform. The pods were sealed again. The water below glowed faintly, then dimmed. Her recorder lay beside her, still blinking red. She picked it up with trembling fingers. The display showed a new timestamp. September 22nd, 1967, 4:42 p.m. Her camera screen lit on its own, replaying footage she hadn't taken, grainy black and white, showing her standing exactly where she was now, staring into the lens. Behind her, the 3 children smiled. Her voice on the recording whispered, "They didn't vanish. They waited." Then the screen went black. Eleanor climbed the ladder out of the vault, daylight bleeding gray through the tunnel mouth. Rain had stopped. The valley smelled clean, renewed. She turned for one last look. The grate lay still, no light, no hum. She whispered to the emptiness, "Rest." As she walked back to her car, the Geiger counter in her pack ticked once. Slow, steady, almost like a heartbeat. And deep underground, in the dark vault beneath the bridge, the pods began to glow again, one after another, until 3 became 4. The storm cleared overnight, leaving Cottonwood washed clean and strangely luminous. Mist lifted off the valley in ribbons. From the ridge, Eleanor watched the water curl through the grass where the river once ran, pale light flickering on its surface like static on old film. She hadn't spoken to anyone in 3 days. The motel phone kept ringing, blocked numbers, empty lines, but she ignored them. Her laptop sat open on the table, replaying the footage she'd brought back from the vault. In the video, the pods sealed themselves. Then, just before the feed cut out, a faint fourth glow appeared behind her reflection. It grew until it eclipsed the frame. She froze the image, zoomed in, enhanced it until the pixels broke apart. The outline was unmistakable. A human figure curled inside a glass pod, hands pressed to the surface. Not a child, an adult. Her pulse quickened. The footage carried a new data tag she hadn't added. Subject 04, Rowan E. She whispered. That's impossible. But the file properties didn't lie. Time-stamped, authenticated by her own camera. She scrolled further through the metadata, tracing the upload path. Somehow, while she slept, the footage had already gone online. Within hours, it had been mirrored across dozens of channels, paranormal forums, true crime pages, even a trending YouTube title. The fourth pod, real footage? The comments ran wild. It's fake. No, it's a confession. Whoever this woman is, she's gone. Eleanor shut the laptop and stared at the motel ceiling. It wasn't the public she feared. It was whoever had buried the first 3 pods. They would see the footage too. By afternoon, she was driving again, camera bag beside her, back roads winding toward the old McCready farmhouse. The property had been fenced off after the flood, condemned but never demolished. The roof sagged inward, windows boarded. Grass grew waist-high around the porch. She pushed through, recording everything. Inside, the air smelled of rot and rain. Furniture sat under a film of dust thick enough to blur every edge. In the corner of the parlor, an overturned cradle rested on its side like a grave marker. Eleanor set the camera on a chair, switched it to record, and opened her notebook. August 12th, she said aloud. McCready residence, probable containment extension, goal, locate evidence of 4th subject, potential adult participant. The floorboards groaned as she crossed into the kitchen. The sink was filled with dark water that reflected the window light. Something glimmered at the bottom, a sliver of metal. She reached in and lifted it out. A key, the same star-shaped bow she'd seen in the old footage. She wiped it clean, heart pounding. The stem was engraved with coordinates she recognized. The quarry. She pocketed it and turned toward the stairs. Halfway up, she heard movement overhead. A soft creak, then the sound of someone breathing. Hello? Silence. She climbed the last steps, flashlight cutting through dust. The hallway stretched narrow, walls papered in fading floral prints. Every door hung open except one at the end. Its knob was new, gleaming brass, uncorroded. The lock plate bore the same lantern and stars emblem as the vault door. Eleanor's hand shook as she fit the star key into the lock. It turned with a smooth click. She pushed the door open and froze. The room beyond was bare except for a single object in the center, a glass cylinder taller than she was, filled with clear liquid. Inside floated a woman, eyes closed, hair drifting like smoke. Her own face. Eleanor staggered back, striking the wall. The air seemed to fold around her. The figure's eyes opened. The reflection, her reflection, blinked once. Then the woman's lips parted, releasing a stream of silver bubbles that spiraled upward through the liquid. Eleanor couldn't breathe. Her mind scrambled for logic, projection, hallucination, chemical residue, but none of it explained the slow, deliberate way the figure raised one hand and pressed it to the glass. A faint hum filled the room, the same subterranean resonance she'd felt in the vault. The floorboards trembled. The air grew charged, buzzing with static. She reached out despite herself, fingertips inches from the surface. The glass was warm. The hum deepened until it vibrated in her chest. For a heartbeat, her reflection overlapped perfectly with the figure inside the cylinder. Same eyes, same scar along the jawline. Then the woman smiled. "Who are you?" Eleanor whispered. The voice that answered came not from the figure, but from the walls themselves, soft, layered with static. "I'm what the mirror keeps when you look too long." The room tilted, her vision blurred. A rush of images flooded her mind. Dr. McCready's face, Price collapsing, the children's laughter, the pods sealing shut. Everything collapsed into one continuous reel, spinning faster until it burned white. When she blinked, she was no longer in the house. She stood on the platform inside the vault, the 3 pods glowing around her. A 4th pod pulsed between them, its glass shimmering like water. From inside, light spilled upward, forming her silhouette. The recorder on her belt blinked red. Her own voice whispered through it. Subject 4 active. Containment breached. The hum reached a crescendo, shaking the chamber. Water cascaded from the ceiling, pooling around her boots. The children appeared again at the edge of the platform, their eyes bright with recognition. "You understand now," Tommy said. "What am I seeing?" "You're seeing what she made us from." Ruthie's voice trembled, almost tender. "You were always here." The light intensified until the chamber vanished. She felt herself weightless, suspended in warmth, surrounded by whispers and fragments of memory. Each one pulsed like a heartbeat, hers, theirs, the river's. Then, everything went dark. Eleanor woke on the kitchen floor of the McCready farmhouse. The glass cylinder was gone. The air smelled of wet dust and ozone. Her camera lay beside her, lens cracked but recording. She pushed herself up, dizzy, trying to piece together what was real. The footage replayed automatically. In it, she saw herself standing before the empty room, whispering to no one. She built a mirror, not a vault. Her reflection on the screen smiled back before fading to static. Outside, engines roared, black SUVs pulling up the dirt road. Men in dark coats stepped out, unmarked vehicles forming a perimeter. One raised a loudspeaker. "Ms. Rowan, step away from the property." Eleanor grabbed the camera and bolted down the back stairs, out through the field. Rain began again, heavy and relentless. She ran until the valley opened before her, the old river glimmering like mercury in the distance. Behind her, voices shouted. Ahead, the water shimmered, ripples spreading outward though there was no wind. She slowed, breath ragged. The key in her pocket pulsed with warmth. The hum beneath the earth rose again, steady and familiar, like the heartbeat of something waking. She whispered into the recorder one last time. "If anyone finds this, don't follow. It doesn't want to be contained." Then she stepped forward into the water. For an instant, the surface exploded with light, brighter than the storm, brighter than day. The men on the ridge shielded their eyes. When the glow faded, the river was still. No trace of her remained, only the reflection of 4 faint lights pulsing beneath the surface. Rain fell for 3 straight days after Eleanor's disappearance. The floodplain swelled until the river swallowed the road to Cottonwood. By the time federal crews arrived, the McCready farmhouse was half collapsed, its roof a wet skeleton against the gray sky. They came without insignia, no press, no local deputies, Just black trucks and portable fences. They worked through the night, hauling crates into the valley, sealing off the tunnels Eleanor had found. Helicopters hovered low, their rotors scattering mist across the fields. At dawn, the town woke to roadblocks and a single official notice stapled to every lamppost. Federal Hazard Containment Site. No entry. Violators subject to prosecution under Title 18. No one mentioned Eleanor by name. Lila Corwin, the motel clerk, told the story anyway. She checked out at 3 a.m., she whispered to the local paper. Said she had proof the kids weren't dead. The article never ran. The editor said the story didn't pass verification. Then he closed his office for electrical repairs. In Washington, a low-lit conference room hummed with the sound of projectors. A half-dozen officials sat around a long table, watching grainy footage pulled from Eleanor's last memory card. On screen, the glowing pods flickered in and out of frame. The timestamp frozen at 9:22, 1967 SAR, 4:42 p.m. "Rowan's material confirms containment breach," said a man in a gray suit. "The resonance signature matches the Holloway experiments." Across the table, a woman in military dress frowned. "We shut those vaults down in 72. The man clicked to the next slide. The river glowing faintly from satellite view. "Not all of them." "Public risk?" someone asked. "Minimal for now. The phenomenon's localized, but exposure to recorded imagery appears to trigger sympathetic resonance." Her upload's already circulating. They watched the screen flicker. Eleanor's reflection merging with the children's the moment the light consumed the frame. The woman exhaled. "Then we neutralize exposure." "Same protocol as Stillwater." "Stillwater?" one of the younger analysts asked. No one answered. Back in Cottonwood, the townspeople gathered at the diner, whispering over coffee. Some swore they'd seen lights on the river again. Others claimed to hear laughter under the bridge at night. Sheriff Dunn, the only official still left, posted a notice on the courthouse door. No trespassing beyond Sector 22. This includes documentary crews. But that same night, 2 teenagers hiked out to the ridge with phones and flashlights. Their live stream lasted 4 minutes before the signal collapsed. The final seconds showed water rising behind them in a perfect circle, reflecting 4 small points of light. The video went viral by morning. The following week, a federal agent named Marcus Alton arrived posing as an environmental inspector. He'd spent 20 years tracing projects like this. Classified experiments hidden under words like containment and cleanup. He carried Eleanor's last email on his encrypted tablet, flagged urgent. "If they tell you I vanished, they're half right. What I found isn't dead. It's remembering." Alton drove the perimeter of Sector 22 at dusk. The flood barriers stood empty, but his radiation meter ticked faintly near the river's bend. He parked by the collapsed bridge and climbed down to the bank. The mud was fresh, disturbed. He crouched and found something half buried. Eleanor's recorder, its red light still blinking though the battery should have been dead. He played it. Static first. Then her voice. "If anyone finds this, don't follow. It doesn't want to be contained." A pause. Then another voice, soft and overlapping hers, like a child's whisper through water. "Hello, Marcus." He froze. The recorder clicked off. Alton straightened slowly, scanning the tree line. Mist drifted off the river, thick enough to blur the horizon. He'd worked in field ops long enough to know when a site wasn't empty. The air here felt charged, pulsing faintly beneath the sound of water. He slipped the recorder into an evidence bag and swept the area with his flashlight. The beam cut across the surface of the river, catching something metallic, half submerged, wedged in the mud. He waited closer until the cold reached his knees. It was a camera. Eleanor's. The lens was cracked, body dented, yet the power light glowed faintly. He switched it on, expecting static, but the display flickered to life. A video began playing automatically. Time code 4:42 p.m. The image showed the vault, same 3 pods glowing in sequence. Then a 4th pod appeared, pulsing with white light. The camera jerked, and Eleanor's face filled the frame. She looked calm, almost serene. "If you're watching this," she said softly, "the vault's already open." It remembers us all now behind her. The light expanded until the feed distorted into vertical lines. The battery indicator still read full. Alton shut the camera off and climbed back up the bank. His shoes squelched in the mud. As he reached the road, headlights swept across him, 2 black trucks idling at the barrier. He recognized the insignia on the plates, even though they weren't supposed to exist anymore. AFRC, Advanced Field Research Command. A man stepped out. "Agent Alton, you're not cleared for this site." "I'm here under Direct Inquiry 12B, Alton said evenly. "Rowan's file was routed to my division." The man smiled thinly. "Then you already know what happens next." Before Alton could respond, a flash of light erupted from the river, bright enough to bleach the world white. When his vision cleared, the trucks, the men, everything was gone. The bridge remained, silent, dripping. He looked down at the camera. Its screen had come alive again, replaying a new image, the same riverbank, empty except for him. But as he watched, a 5th reflection appeared on the water's surface, his own face beside 4 others. He whispered, "Containment breached." By morning, the entire valley was sealed under federal order. Satellite maps blurred the coordinates, aerial footage replaced with static cloud cover. The official statement cited unstable geological contamination. But those who lived closest knew better. At night, the power grid flickered in sync with a low vibration that rolled through the ground. The water level rose and fell rhythmically, as if something beneath were breathing. The old-timers whispered that the McCready kids had come home. In Washington, the footage from Alton's recovered camera was archived under a new classification. Project Lantern, active. A handwritten note in the margin read, "Containment possible only through collective forgetting." Yet forgetting proved impossible. Fragments of Eleanor's uploads reappeared on dark web servers and encrypted drives. People claimed to hear voices whispering through their headphones when the clips played. Children counting. A woman saying, "Remember kindly." Some viewers reported seeing themselves reflected in the footage, standing beside Eleanor at the vault. A rumor spread that every file containing the timestamp 4:42 p.m. became infected, looping endlessly until the screen went white. Weeks later, on an isolated night watch, a technician monitoring the river sensors logged an anomaly. The report read simply, 4 luminescent signatures detected beneath surface. At 4:42:23, 5th signature appeared, source indeterminate. He attached one still image, water glimmering faintly, the shapes just visible. Then his terminal went dark. Rain hammered the capital that night, washing the color from the city until everything looked like a reflection of itself. Marcus Alton sat alone in a concrete sub-basement beneath the Department of Energy's Western Annex, the kind of place where even the air felt redacted. In front of him glowed a single monitor marked Class Theta Access Only. On screen, a progress bar crawled across the words Project Lantern. Restricted. He shouldn't have had clearance, but Eleanor's last transmission had carried her old credentials, and something in the system still recognized her key. He'd followed the trail of her emails through a dozen firewalls until it ended here, under the same classification code that had once buried the Stillwater files. The first document opened like a confession. Subject Alpha, McCready Children. Dated 1967. Author, Dr. Harlan Vexler. Primary objective, isolate mnemonic resonance in juvenile subjects to determine if shared memory can survive corporeal loss. Containment medium, aqueous reflective substrate. Early results promising, subjects respond to auditory cues long after exposure termination. Alton scrolled. The next page was an image. 3 small silhouettes standing in waist-deep water, hands linked, eyes glowing faintly as if backlit from within. Beside it, a note in the margin: "Do not photograph directly after 4:42 p.m. Distortion event recurring." His breath caught. 4:42 again. He copied everything to an encrypted drive, but the monitor flickered, as if aware of what he was doing. A new window appeared by itself. Video file, unmarked. He clicked play. The feed was black and white, grainy. A man in a lab coat addressed the camera. "Test log 9B, subject stable, introducing external observer, Rowan prototype lens." In the corner of the frame stood a woman wearing headphones, adjusting an antique camera. Eleanor's resemblance to her was uncanny, but the date in the corner read 1968-06-14, long before Eleanor's birth. "Begin sequence," the man said. A tone rose, low, harmonic. The children in the tank lifted their heads in unison. The water around them shimmered, forming concentric rings of light that pulsed outward, matching the rhythm of the tone. The woman turned toward the lens, her mouth moving, though no sound reached the recording. The screen flared white, then nothing. Then Alton leaned back, shaking. The archive continued to unspool on its own. Memos, field notes, telegrams marked "Eyes Only." Each referenced containment mirrors, memory saturation, and a phrase repeated throughout: "The light remembers." He realized then that Eleanor hadn't discovered the phenomenon. She'd inherited it. Every generation, another observer, another keeper. By dawn, he was on a train heading north. The files were hidden in his jacket, drive sealed inside a lead-lined pouch. His destination was Cottonwood, though the maps no longer labeled it. The government had wiped the coordinates, but he'd memorized the back roads. The valley still existed. He could feel it pulling. He reached the perimeter fence by afternoon. Federal signage had faded, bullet-holed and wind-torn. Beyond it lay the dry bed of the river, cracked mud, wild grass reclaiming the floodplain. But even here, the air hummed faintly, like power lines in fog. He descended the slope toward the spot where the vault had been. A shallow depression remained, overgrown with reeds. He knelt and brushed away dirt until glass gleamed beneath. A mirror panel, half buried. When he wiped it clean, the reflection wasn't his own. 3 children looked up at him through the glass. One smiled. "Eleanor," he whispered. The smallest girl shook her head slowly. Her lips moved, but no sound came. The surface rippled once, then stilled, leaving only his face staring back. Alton exhaled. "All right," he said softly. "Show me." He unpacked his camera, set it on a tripod, and began to film. At first, nothing. Then light bled through the cracks in the mirror, forming shapes, letters, fragments of sentences. Project Lantern. Containment breach. Memory threshold reached. The ground trembled. The mirror cracked outward like ice. Beneath it, liquid light churned, illuminating the valley from below. A voice spoke, not from the air, but from inside his head. "You opened it again." He stepped back, shielding his eyes. "Who are you?" "We are what they kept." The light surged upward, washing the reeds in silver fire. Alton's camera fell, still rolling. Through the lens, the valley appeared transformed, half water, half sky, every reflection inverted. The children stood in the center, joined by a tall figure holding a lantern. Eleanor. She raised her free hand toward him. "You can't stop remembering," she said. "You can only choose how the story ends." Then the image collapsed into white. 3 hours later, satellite reconnaissance captured a single anomaly over the valley. A perfect circle of light expanding and fading at 4:42 p.m. exactly. When the retrieval teams arrived, they found Alton's vehicle, the tripod, and a melted patch of glass fused to the soil. Inside the camera, the last frame frozen mid-flash showed 6 figures reflected in a sheet of water, 5 children and 1 man. The report was filed under Project Lantern. Terminated. A handwritten edition followed. Cycle complete / next observer pending. The footage leaked online 3 weeks later. It was only 30 seconds long, a single handheld shot of light bleeding through darkness, but those who saw it swore it changed each time they watched. Some claimed to hear a child humming behind the static. Others said the camera's reflection showed not the person filming, but someone watching from the opposite side of the screen. The clip was traced to an anonymous upload in Missouri. The username, observer_5. By the time federal agents located the IP address, the account was gone. All that remained was a geotag, Cottonwood Valley, 4:42 p.m. Autumn turned the fields brittle and pale. A documentary intern named Riley Vexler arrived with a borrowed camera and a head full of unfinished research. He was 23, working on a thesis about rural folklore and generational trauma. He didn't know that the surname Vexler once belonged to a government scientist, Dr. Harlan Vexler, founder of Project Lantern. He only knew that his grandmother never spoke of her brother, who had disappeared upstate in the 60s. Riley parked beside the rusted remains of the warning fence. The land beyond was open now, wild and strangely peaceful. The riverbed had dried again after a summer drought, leaving a smooth depression where the vault once breathed. He stepped carefully, camera rolling, his voice low and uncertain. Site survey, Cottonwood Valley. Locals claim the area hums at night, probably groundwater resonance, but... He stopped. The air was still. No hum, only the faint, steady sound of water that shouldn't have been there. He walked closer. A shallow pool had gathered in the center of the depression, fed by no visible source. Its surface reflected the overcast sky perfectly. No ripples, no wind. When he pointed the camera down, the viewfinder adjusted automatically, brightness pulsing. Then he noticed it. The reflection showed him standing in sunlight. He looked up. Clouds. He looked back. Sunlight, and someone behind him. He turned. No one. "Jesus," he whispered, voice shaking just enough to make the microphone crackle. This isn't." The reflection shifted again. The figure behind him moved closer in the glass. A woman, blurred by distance, holding something bright in her hand. He raised the camera higher, zooming in. The autofocus fought to adjust. The light intensified until the lens flared. Then her face came into view. Eleanor. She looked younger than in the recovered footage. Her eyes calm, her expression not unkind. "You found us," she said. The voice didn't come through the air, but through the camera's internal mic, soft and direct. Riley took a step back. "Who are you?" "The 5th," she replied. "The one who sees." The ground beneath his boots vibrated faintly, like a distant engine. The water began to glow from within, rippling outward. "Why me?" he whispered. "Because you still believe in the story," she said. "And stories need witnesses." The pool expanded, swallowing the cracks of the riverbed. The sound deepened, a layered hum that built until it matched the rhythm of a heartbeat. Riley's camera trembled in his hands, lens shaking as light rose like mist around him. He stumbled backward, nearly dropping it, but the strap caught around his wrist. Through the viewfinder, he saw 6 figures emerging from the water, children first, then a man, then a woman with a lantern raised high. Claire Rowan's silhouette flickered beside Eleanor's. At the center of them stood a new reflection, indistinct but familiar. Him. The camera beeped twice. The time code locked at 4:42:00. The lens filled with white. Days later, hikers found Riley's car still idling by the fence, headlights on, recording equipment gone. Local police searched the dry basin but found no footprints, only a patch of earth fused to glass. The footage he captured surfaced a week after his disappearance, shared anonymously with the title, "The Fifth Reflection." Analysts who examined the clip confirmed there was no digital tampering, yet every frame appeared to contain microscopic variations, as if the light itself carried encoded images. When enhanced, those fragments revealed dozens of faces layered through decades. The Holloway cousins, Claire Rowan, Sheriff Penner, Eleanor, Marcus Alton, and finally Riley himself, all standing beneath a single arch of light shaped like a bridge. A final whisper under the static completed the file. "We are the memory that keeps the world from forgetting." The video ended at 4:42. After that, sightings began spreading again. Reflections caught in puddles, mirrors fogging with the words, "Hold still," phones freezing at 4:42 each afternoon. Government bulletins blamed electromagnetic interference from nearby cell towers. The explanation didn't matter. The story had entered its next phase, because once a reflection is seen, it never truly fades. It waits. And somewhere in the valley, as dusk gathers like a tide, light begins to stir beneath the soil, pulsing softly, counting, waiting for the next observer to arrive. The Cottonwood Valley was declared a conservation zone in 2030. The official signs called it the McCready Wetlands, though there was no river left to protect. Only glassy soil and reeds that whispered when the wind passed through. Few came anymore. The last residents had moved away after the tremors, after the strange static that filled radios every afternoon at 4:42. But some nights, when the moon hung low, travelers swore they could still see light shimmering beneath the earth, as if the valley were breathing through its scars. One of them was a filmmaker from Chicago named Amara Vexler, Riley's younger sister. She arrived in silence, driving a rented car down the cracked highway her brother had taken years before. She didn't bring much, just his camera, a half-empty notebook, and a single Polaroid she'd found inside an envelope marked "Do Not Forget." The picture showed 6 figures under a bridge of light. At the bottom margin, in a faint pencil line, he'd written, "They remember for us." The air smelled of iron and rain. She stepped past the barrier and followed the old trail down into the basin. Grass brushed her knees. The soil glittered faintly where water once ran. She set the camera on a tripod and started recording. "My name is Amara Vexler," she said softly. "My brother came here looking for a story. I'm here to finish it." Wind stirred the reeds. For a long time, nothing moved except the clouds crossing the stars. Then, as the night deepened, the ground beneath her feet began to glow, first faint, then bright enough to cast shadows. The light spread outward in circles, stopping at the edge of the basin. She raised the camera. The lens pulsed as if alive. Through the viewfinder, the reflection of the valley shifted. Water filled the depression again, gleaming under moonlight. And there, standing knee-deep in the mirrored surface, were the same 6 figures she'd seen in Riley's photo. Claire, Eleanor, the Holloway children, her brother, each one bathed in pale fire, each one smiling gently. Amara's breath caught. "Riley?" He nodded. "It's okay," he said, his voice clear, carrying without echo. "The story remembers now." "You don't have to, but what is it?" she asked. "What's the light?" Eleanor stepped forward, the lantern in her hand glowing steady and warm. "It's everything they tried to erase," she said. "Every truth buried to keep the world comfortable. The river, the vault, the reflections. They're all one thing, memory made visible." Claire looked up at the night sky, where clouds had parted in a single circle of stars. Someone always finds it again. Someone always looks back. Amara felt tears slip down her face. "Then why me?" Riley smiled faintly. "Because you listened." The light swelled around them until she couldn't tell water from air. The camera trembled, its feed distorting. Through the glare, she thought she saw dozens of others emerging, Faces from film reels, newspaper clippings, forgotten photographs, all joining hands under the bridge of light that arched across time itself. Then the glow faded. The basin was empty again. Only her camera remained, still recording. She picked it up, heart pounding, and looked through the viewfinder one last time. The reflection showed the same valley, quiet and ordinary. But when she tilted the lens, the light returned, faint, rhythmic, alive. 6 pulses, then 7. She whispered, "Thank you." The camera clicked. Years later, archivists cataloged the recovered footage under a new classification, the Stillwater Project, Unified Memory Archive. The recording ran exactly 4 minutes and 42 seconds. At its end, Amara's voice could be heard whispering the same words every previous observer had spoken. "If you see the light, remember kindly." When the frame faded to black, a final image lingered, a soft glow beneath glass, the outline of a lantern, and the reflection of the person watching. In every mirror, puddle, or polished lens across the country, some viewers swore they could glimpse it, just for a heartbeat. When the clock struck 4:42, a bridge of light, endless and patient, waiting for the next observer. Because the story never ended. It simply waited to be seen again.